What's your favorite stone, by the way?
My favorite stone is the stone that I buy.
That you cut and you sell at auction.
And I sell.
You've heard the saying, what happens in Vegas stays in Vegas, but not quite when I'm around, because I'm here to meet with Steven Silver, the man who sold the Pink Promise, one of the largest pink diamond ever sold at auction, amongst many other stories, including the one with the rise of independent watchmakers in Menlo Park. Hey guys, welcome to LA series. I am here with Steven Silver, who's the founder of Steven Silver Corporation based in Menlo Park. He's been not only one of the biggest gem dealer in the industry, but also very big in jewelry, estate jewelry, and more recently in watches. So Steven, the first time we ever were in contact was, I guess, in 2018, right after you sold the Pink Promise. The Pink Promise, for those who don't know what it is, it's the largest, one of the largest pink diamonds ever sold at auction.
Vivid pink.
Vivid pink, but you made it vivid pink in recutting it.
That's correct.
So can you tell us a little bit about this extraordinary accomplishment, which is why we got to meet in the first place, which is very good. A nice surprise over the phone at 3:30 in the morning, European time.
Yeah, I remember that interview. No, we were very excited. I mean, I got a call one day in 2014 from a very good friend of mine who is down here in Los Angeles, and he had acquired the opportunity to sell an intense pink, which is the way I bought it. And when we saw the stone, we saw that because of how old it was, the last cutting on the stone was done probably 40 years before I bought it. And a lot has changed in 40 years. A lot of technology has been driven into cutting in general, and the understanding of how to cut colored diamonds has changed quite a bit over the course of the last 30, 40 years. So we saw that there could be an opportunity to improve the color in the face-up position, which is how we see things when we wear it in jewelry. So it was quite a journey.
And you didn't think you were going to hit a world record the way you did it?
You know, when you're buying things, you focus on how much you pay for something on the day you buy it based upon the market you're in at that moment.
Of course.
You hope that you can improve it. You're measuring against not improving it while suffering weight loss and time, but you're tying money up. And then, when you hit it, you either hit it correctly or you don't. We didn't really know how well the stone was going to do in auction or not. All we knew is that it was one of the more unique stones that had hit the international auction markets at that time. Pinks are extraordinarily rare anyways.
And they still are to this day because of mind closing and the fact that you can't find them.
If you look at the size of this thing, I mean, it's 15 carats, vivid pink, near flawless. These are stones.
And you sold it for more than 32 million, if I recall.
It was just slightly above, yeah. So at that time, it was a world record. We had broke the previous record by 7 or 8%. And this is and actually that day wasn't exactly what I would call the optimum auction day either. There was a lot of turmoil in the world. A lot of the big buyers were not participating in that auction because of all kinds of nonsense that was going on around the world that was causing a little bit of angst. So we probably would have done a little better on a different day, but that's the day we chose. And when you're going to auction,
you can't really back out. Right? Exactly.
So, which is also a little exciting because you got to be really on your game to make that kind of an exit worthwhile.
When you're talking about hitting things correctly at the right moment, that's what you did with that Pink Promise diamond, but you've been in the estate jewelry and you've been in the jewelry industry for a very long time before you hit the market with watches at a time where watches are now booming and becoming a hot topic.
Right.
how did that transition happen, and how did you first got into estate jewelry?
So I'll go back a little bit. So my education is geology and gemology. That's what got me interested in this. I got very lucky. I went to GIA at a very, very interesting point in time.
Escaping a family's vacation.
Escaping a family vacation, exactly. And in 1976, GIA was a very young company still. In fact, I think I was either the second last class or the last class to graduate from the original GIA building in Brentwood on San Vicente. And one of my professors, Bill Boyajian, wound up becoming the president of GIA a number of years later and had the vision to build a campus that bought the property that the GIA campus now sits on. And Bill and I developed a wonderful relationship over a long period of time, and now Bill is on my board of advisors. So it's sort of an interesting thing how things evolve.
Yeah. But it also means that you got into the GIA right around the time where they introduced the GIA certification with the 4 Cs that basically put into perspective the way of grading system, how diamonds were being graded.
Yeah, in fact, that was what attracted me to go to GIA and do this, what I thought was just going to be a summer course on diamond grading, because I found it, as a geology student, I found it fascinating that there was a company that developed a systematic or a measuring system or a grading system for gem quality diamonds. So
for white diamonds mostly, because colored diamonds were not.
Well, they weren't as popular. I mean, they had a colored diamond certificate even as far back as then, but the popularity of colored diamonds wasn't even on the radar at that point. Most of the colored diamonds that I knew of that I was in contact with at that very young age were owned by dealers, and they would show the stones so that we could see. I appreciated great color, and so my original exposure to colored diamonds was in dealers' offices, not presented the way they are today in retail and so on and so forth. So some of the great colored diamonds I've ever seen are probably still being held by those families. It's a great storage of wealth, because these are the rare diamonds, the colored diamonds, the blues, the pinks, the reds, the Zimmy yellows and greens and so on. These are statements, geological statements of rarity, which is different than white diamonds on the Cape scale from D to Z, because these are diamonds that are, although they're gem quality in the context of clarity and purity and so on, they're still, fairly abundant.
And so from the GIA, then you moved on to learning how to cut diamonds, and
that was an interesting experience. Yeah. So I went from GIA. It went from a summer course to not go on a vacation, to take a diamond grading course, to completing the entire GG program, to dropping out of college as a senior because I knew exactly what I wanted to do. So I sort of saw the rest of my undergraduate work as not necessary, because I wasn't going to go into seismic studies. I wasn't going to teach at a university. I wasn't going to go into oil and gas. I didn't find it particularly interesting, but new
gemology and stones were going to be a thing.
Literally.
What about jewelry? Because being in the stones is one thing, but jewelry, when you have to think about a setting, you were talking about creativity earlier.
Right.
Was it something that you had pictured with Imogen in the first place?
So, look, everything happens for a reason in life, right? And timing is everything. I get the gemology degree. My grandfather's brother introduces me to a guy who owns the biggest jewelry manufacturing company in Los Angeles that had this big loose diamond division. I went to work for them as a Milan sorter, which is like, if you're
sorting out the tiny diamonds to figure out which one.
This is like if you're in a jewelry shop, you start by sweeping the floors. That's what Milan sorting is, especially at that time. But it was a great it was great training for me, because even, when you're melange sorting, you're spending a second to a second and a half on a stone, and you're grading it for where it belongs in a pile that goes into a factory to be manufactured with. So, the skill set that I developed as a melange sorter, even to this day I use it, whether I'm grading.
Because your eye is trained to the colors, the brilliance, the cut, the facets, and everything.
Correct. So it's a repetitive process, and your skill set and your acuity develops, obviously. And while I was working for them, I befriended a guy who was in my age group. His father was a diamond cutter in the same building as where I was working. His father liked me and said, would you like to learn how to diamond cut? And I said, why not? So every day I would brown bag it to work every day with my sandwich, and during my lunch hour I would go down and I would cut diamonds, and I learned how to cut with this guy. So would I ever use it? Would I ever be a diamond cutter? No, but I found it interesting, and it was a skill set.
Learning all the stages to make you the person. You're not perfect, but the person that you are today.
Correct. So it's this is all evolution, right? So you develop skill sets, and they go into a toolbox, and as long as you've got the tool in the box, you never know when you're going to need to pull it out and use it. And for me,
a Swiss knife.
Yeah, it's like a Swiss Army knife, right? Mm-hmm. So for me, it was like the diamond cutting experience, for lack of a better description, allowed me to be able to talk to diamond cutters a little bit more articulately than diamond dealers.
Because you knew what you were talking about.
Because I had a common bond, and I could talk a language with them initially that when you develop a relationship with a great diamond cutter, a lot of it is not even talked about anymore, because he assumes and I assume he knows I know. So a lot of you save a lot of time. I think that's the most precious benefit I got from that, is the ability to communicate with cutters pretty easily. And
drawing a parallel with watches, because then you're going to tell us how you got into watches and how you got to choose mostly independent watchmakers. Don't you see a parallel in the relationship you've developed with those stun cutters when you work with independent watchmakers, where you need to be with those suppliers from the people who make the hand or the crown or the movement or the different things that to some extent you're confronting, or you're face to face with these people, and they're not just people from...
Yeah, I mean, I think that, as you evolve as a human being and you're introduced to different situations, some of which you perceive as opportunities, others you don't. As I evolved in my career, I got this great opportunity. I was in the right class at the right time at GIA. I went to work for a company and met some wonderful people in the marketplace in Los Angeles that taught me a lot. I was involved with a lot of estate jewelers down in the downtown area in Los Angeles, because I was intrigued by the history of our trade and the history of these wonderful companies that were built in sort of the golden age of our industry between 1850 and 1950, and there's so much great history there. And so it became sort of this bounty of opportunity. And I was most attracted to the estate jewelry side when I started, even as far back as the mid to late 70s when I was working in Los Angeles. And then I got a great opportunity to come back to the Bay Area where I was raised, to work for a jeweler that really enjoyed estate jewelry as well. And he taught me how to appraise and how to evaluate for appraisal, because putting values on things is another process as well.
Another skill you had to learn.
But by that time, I had developed skill set in cutting, manufacturing, sorting, et cetera, et cetera. So all of that skill set that was developed in my early years, I could apply to this final job that I had before I started my own company. And then in 1980, I took the leap and started my own company with very little capital, a fair amount of knowledge, and a big desire to win. And so,
which you did.
Well,
so
I don't know
levels.
if I won, but I'm having a hell of a time trying. Yeah, I'm having a good time trying to win. So.
Because you had one of the smallest stores at some point that had the biggest revenue.
Well, so the way this whole thing...
Don't be shy, tell us the story.
No. So the way this whole thing came about with us going into... Because the company was developed on, buying estate jewelry from the public through the stores that we supplied our estate jewelry to. That was the formula. And so we were constantly replenishing our inventory by all the retailers.
Sort of white labeling.
Yeah, I mean, but Stephen Silver was part of Bloomingdale's for 10 years. We were supplying them, and that was sort of the mid-range. But we were supplying, at the peak of our wholesale business, 100 retailers globally, and also auction houses as well. Our biggest challenge was replenishing our inventory because it's all one-off, one piece, right? So that was the business model until my son, the first retail store we opened was when a good friend of mine, who unfortunately passed away last year, called me up and said that, Stanford University was building a big hotel in Menlo Park, and he was a big benefactor to the university, and asked me if I'd be interested in opening up a retail in this place called the Rosewood Hotel, Sand Hill Road. And I said, absolutely not. I have no interest at all in opening up retail. And he said, Steve, you really should look at this. This is a good opportunity, because a lot of people know who you are in our local community, but they're a little intimidated coming up and doing anything with you because you're going through, locked doors and offices, and it's a wholesale business, not a retail business. And I said, okay, I'll look at it. And knowing that hotel retail is the worst retail in the world to be in, because it's, there's so many things that can go wrong.
It's a big bet.
Yeah, a big bet for sure. Because, even in retail, when you own the space you're in, that's where the limitation of your risk is. But when you're in a hotel, all kinds of things can happen, mostly influenced by the hotel that you're in.
Of course.
So you have this other level of risk there that you're not in control of when you're in a hotel retail. But anyways, it is what it is. And through a series of really funny anecdotes, we finally wound up opening up a little, what we called a jewel box. And it was literally 90 square feet. That was it, which was perfect for me because I didn't want to be there to begin with. But I did what John asked me to do, and that was open up a little retail presence. And it was just amazing how right he was. We were doing amazing numbers. If you look at it on a per square foot basis, we were knocking it out of the ballpark from the first month we were there. And we opened up in one of the worst years you could open up a retail store, which is 2008. Right in the middle of this horrible recession that we were in. So the fact that we were successful in the process of opening up in a pretty lousy period of time was pretty interesting. And then in 2000, I guess, what is this, 2015 or 14, right around the time we were cutting the Pink Promise, my son presented a business plan to me to expand our retail.
And your son was not even 25 at the time.
Yeah, he was. Yeah, that's right. He was probably 25. Yeah, 20.
That's how I know that.
Yeah. It was about 8 years ago, and so behind my back, him, Jared and our chief operating officer at the time for the company, they were writing a business plan. And this was Jared all the way because he's a very analytical guy. He's a smart guy. He's pretty smart, I think. But I'm a little prejudiced there, I guess. But he was collecting data in the hotel. How many people were coming in? How many were walking into the store? How many were walking by the store? How many were women? How many were men? what time of the day were we getting most activity, blah, blah, blah. All these different data points he was collecting. And when he finally got enough data, he put a business plan in place that pointed to how to make the best effort with what he perceived to be the traffic that was in the hotel. Don't forget, Rosewood, it's a very interesting environment in that you don't really have to qualify the client. Because if they're there to,
means that
they have the ability to do virtually anything. It's a high-end luxury resort, and also being on Sand Hill Road predisposes yourself to a clientele because this is the venture capital hub of the world. So a lot of things were easier to collate, because of the fact that the location of the hotel. And what he determined was that we were in the wrong business for the hotel. That jewelry really wasn't resonating with most of the people that were walking in the hotel or staying at the hotel. So you have this transient clientele that's coming in and out of the hotel, and then you have this huge community involvement in the hotel as well. The community really embraced it as a place to go. So whether it was people having lunch there or dinner there or events there, it was a very, very active place. And what he determined is that we were in the wrong business. We should be selling watches or presenting watches, not
just
jewelry.
any watches.
Well, that's the evolution of that's pretty funny, because we, of course, thought, well, we're going to build this store
With the big players.
and we're going to go after the big players, right? We're going to go after the brands that Richemont owns and LVMH owns and the rest. And we were getting absolutely no traction with them at all. They were, and what we quickly realized is that a lot of these brands are not risk takers. They're not making decisions. Exactly. They're not making decisions to bushwhack and cut new paths of innovation. In this case, retailing. They're very, very comfortable doing what they do, and which is fine. But that's not what we were after. We were after something a little different, because we have a very unique clientele. This is this one area of the world, this little microcosm called Menlo Park. And, when you consider that 3/4 of the value of the NASDAQ was raised off of that 2.5 mile stretch of road, it's pretty crazy. And it's also got probably the highest concentration of billionaire wealth in the world, residentially.
So unique people, you need unique watches.
Exactly. And so, what are we going to do that's going to attract a well-traveled clientele that is in the world of innovation and technology? What are we going to do in that store that's going to attract them to pay attention to us versus other retailers? And the industry itself forced us in that direction, which was an interesting anecdote, because we couldn't get any traction from the big boys. We had a wonderful opportunity that was presented out to us through an introduction to talk to Richard Mille, and this goes back 8 years ago, before Richard Mille was where they are today, and AP, and they, God bless them, gave us an opportunity to represent them in our first store, and a bunch of other brands, Laurent Ferrier, who, by the way, is one of the really great gentlemen I've ever met in my life. Renaissance. I mean, we had so many Max Buser, MB&F. They all embraced the opportunity to do this, and we made a decision very quickly that we would not go to a major brand. We were going to create an environment that was just independent watchmaking.
But what's amazing is that Jared brought you into this.
Yeah, I had nothing to do with it.
Because you knew nothing.
Nothing.
What's amazing is that
I owned two watches when he brought this plan to me. I owned a Patek that was made in the late 30s or early 40s. with beautiful Art Deco lugs that I would wear to very dressy events, like black tie events. And then I owned Cartier Tank Americain and in rose gold. That was it. That's all I owned until Jared brought that I wore.
But what's amazing is that when I see Jared at fairs looking at stones with the same intensity and passion, and the other way around, where when I see you talk about watches and wearing independent watch, it's you guys have bonded and made something more than just a family business. And you were telling me earlier that one of your biggest dreams, I guess, it's probably one of also big achievements, that you brought your son into the company, developing a whole new range of business that you never thought you would be able to.
Yeah, I mean, succession's a tough play. That's why most first-generation businesses go out of business. They don't have an opportunity to drive a second generation. And what was wonderful about how this happened is that Jared made his own mark coming into this family business that had nothing to do with me, which I think is very unique, and it's made it a lot easier to teach him about the core of the family business that I developed, and also vice versa.
Yeah, but it's driven by creativity, passion, patience, experience, etc., etc.
Yes, all those things. And now when I sit back and look at where we are today, especially in the watch in the watch division, it's really quite remarkable how far he's come in developing this business in a relatively short period of time. It's only been 7. This will be our 8th year, and now we're doing some interesting, innovative work on a watch that we're doing with one of our brands, and
you're on the verge of creating some limited editions and opening a Mad Lab, and you yourself are on another project, which is back to the Pink Promise and education, because it's also one of the big things that you like to do.
We're producing a documentary on a little bit on the history of the company, obviously, and then how it evolved into us finally, developing enough skill set and the ability to take some fairly decent risks in buying the Pink Promise and what that whole thing was. So we were very, very fortunate to be able to take the time to build some film into the development of the Pink Promise, the cutting of the Pink Promise. So we were able to use it in this documentary.
Perfect. So, I can't wait to see it.
Yeah, it'll be fun. It'll be fun. We'll see what happens. I hope it's successful, because if this one is, then we'll do a few more documentaries on different other things that we involve ourselves with.
Independent Watchmakers.
Independent Watchmakers, cutting of rubies and sapphires and emeralds.
And all these other not considered precious stones, which are super rare and harder to find, like Paribas and opals and all these stones that are not considered being precious stones, but eventually, to some extent, they are.
They're all precious to some degree, because everybody appreciates something for whatever it is.
What's your favorite stone, by the way?
My favorite stone is the stone that I buy.
That you cut and you sell at auction.
I sell. I mean, I don't have any one stone but I enjoy the challenge of cutting colored diamonds is very challenging, and the success is somewhat limited. So we're taking probably more inherent risk cutting colored diamonds than most other stones, because there's all kinds of inherent risk to the process that colored stones doesn't have. So that's probably our biggest challenge, is cutting the rare colored diamonds.
Well, move on to the next challenge.
The next one. They don't happen very often. Look at that. In almost 45 years of doing this, I can count the really rare, important things on one hand.
Opportunities,
on one hand, yeah. So.
Well, and you're the lucky guy too.
Every once in a while, I get lucky, but so do a lot of other people. So
that is true. To other degrees.
Yeah.
So for you, who's the most creative amongst all these creative minds?
Oh my God, they all have their own story.